my tribe. How are you? I hope that you are all doing well and wonderful, even amongst all this craziness that we have going on in our world right now. But what better time to spread some light and love than right now? So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Lindsey Sadowski, and I wanted to talk to you today about a little bit about my journey and what I went through, and how I've really come to the other side of all of this. And I want to talk about a very important lesson that was given to me along my journey, and that was about committing to your self-care. But before we get there, I just want to share with you a little bit about how I got to the place where I am now. So, several years ago, actually when I was 12 years old, which was a long time ago, I knew that I was drawn to a career in sports medicine. I loved playing sports, but more importantly, I loved helping people. And so I was trying to figure out a way, how could I help people in both aspects? And that's when sports medicine was really drawn to me, that I would be able to do the best of both worlds and being able to help people out. So I furthered my education and I ended up going to college, and I studied sports medicine with the major of athletic training, and I graduated and started working for a high school and was contracted there by a large hospital system. So I absolutely loved my job. I had actually one of the largest high schools in the state, so I was in charge of about 800 athletes, which was a large amount. And I was in charge of taking care of all of their healthcare needs, from anything as minor as them cutting their finger to anything that could be life-threatening. So I had a huge responsibility of taking care of these kids, but I wouldn't have traded it for the world. And one day in my practice, I had this young gentleman who showed up, and I recognized right away that he was not one of my athletes, but day after day he kept coming into my practice, and I finally asked him, like, who are you? And he introduced himself, and he started saying, well, I heard that you're the cool teacher, and I really wanted to come meet you. And we just started talking, and he quickly shared that he had a pretty rough life, that he came from a family where lots of drugs and alcohol were being used, and I think he was just looking for a little bit of support. Unfortunately, I have an older sister that went down that route as well, so I understood a little bit of what he was going through, and I did my best every day to kind of give him hope that he did not have to choose that path. And I asked him if he would be interested in playing sports, because I thought at least that would give him an opportunity to start changing his life, and it would give him something to concentrate on, especially after school. So he agreed, and so I went to our football coach and I asked him, is there any way that you take this kid on? I know it's towards the end of the season, but I really just want to help this kid out. And the coach agreed, and he said, you just have to get all of his equipment ordered. And this kid had such a big head, literally, that I had to special order him a football helmet. And by the time that helmet came in, football season was pretty much over. So I wasn't going to be able to help him out in that way. So I went to the next best thing, and I went to our wrestling coach, and I asked him if he would be willing to take this kid on. And I said, he would definitely be your heavyweight, and I will help you as best I can, but will you help me help him make just a better life for himself? And he agreed. So every day this gentleman would come into me, and we would work together, and I would just give him little tidbits of how he could change his life, and I helped him out quite a bit. Fast forwarding to the summertime, and he was doing amazing. We also were in the process. There was a family that was willing to adopt him. His parents were willing to give up rights because they just weren't able to take care of him. So this other family was willing to step in and help him. So I was helping them with his health care, and everything was going really well for this kid. So that July, I decided I needed to take a little bit of a break, and I was going to go on vacation to Vegas just for 3 days. And right before I left, I saw this young man in the school parking lot. And he came up to me and he said, Miss Linz, he goes, thank you so much for everything that you have done for me. You've really helped me turn my life around. So that gave me this sense of peace to go on vacation, knowing that he was okay, he was in a good spot. So I went on vacation and I just went for 3 days. And when I returned, I got so sick. I could not sit, I couldn't stand, I couldn't lay, I couldn't kneel. My body was experiencing this full pain. And it was around 4 o'clock in the morning on July 4th. And I called my dad because I lived on my own at the time. I was around 25 years old, 24 years old actually at this point. And I called my dad to come pick me up to take me to the emergency room. And he did. And I'm laying in there and the doctors took a bunch of tests and they came in and they kept telling me, we really don't know what's going on. We can't find anything on your test results. And it was about 6 o'clock that morning that my phone went off. And it was one of my student aides at the school asking me if I heard the news. And, you know, at my school, it's so big, there's always stuff going on. And I wrote back, well, what's going on? And she sent me a text message back saying that this young man that I was working with took heroin, and that heroin was laced and it killed him. And instantaneously, all that pain, everything that I was holding in my body, it immediately went away. And I didn't understand it at the time, but as I started to do healing work several years later, I recognized that I was feeling that boy die. And the crazy part is later on, I found out that he was actually in the same hospital that I was in, and he died a few hours earlier in that same hospital. And, I had a really hard time dealing with that because more than anything, obviously I was sad, but I was so angry at him because I felt like I gave him every tool to help himself and to live a better life. And he tries this one time, and that one time it just happened to be laced with things that fentanyl that actually killed him instantaneously, from what I've heard. And it just ripped me apart, but I was so angry at him for doing this. And I reluctantly went to his funeral because I did feel like I needed to go for him. But again, I was so angry that he made this decision that ultimately ended his life. And when I went, I did go by myself, and I looked at him, and he had this smirk on his face. I'll never forget it. And instantaneously, I had this peace and calm that came over me. And I just recognized that he was put in my life, even though it was a short amount of time. He was there to be my teacher. And even though I didn't know how much he was going to be my teacher, I knew that he was going to be my teacher in a big way. And it released a lot of this anger that I was holding on for him, even though I had a lot of sadness inside. So I didn't really know how to deal with it, so I just kept on moving forward in life. And then fast forward 4 months to the date, we were back at the tail end of football season at this point, and I was taping the boys' ankles, getting them ready for practice when the coach walked in. And he had this look on his face of, I need to talk to you right now. And I knew that it wasn't good. And so I excused myself from taping the boys' ankles, and I walked outside, and the coach asked me if I knew any news about this certain player. And I said, yeah, he was being evaluated for this skin infection that he potentially had on his back. And the coach goes, what do you mean? How did you know about that? And I said, well, you sent him in to me earlier this week, and I didn't like the way that it looked, so I sent him to get it evaluated by a physician and to get that culture to make sure that it was no type of staph infection. And he said, Lindsey, they just found him dead at home. And within minutes, I was surrounded by the principal and the vice principal and the athletic director and other coaches bombarding me with questions about him. And I am just trying to process that another one of my students had passed away. And I couldn't even think straight. And again, I was just being bombarded by all these questions. And it was probably one of the worst days of my life, not just me hearing the news, but having to go back in that locker room and hearing that coach tell all of these boys that another one of their brothers passed away of something unknown. And later on that night, I made it over to my parents' house. I don't even know how I got there, but I unconsciously drove there. And they turned on the news, and all over the news, there was all of this jargon about how this kid died of a deadly staph infection. And my mouth hit the floor. I mean, we had no clue what this boy died of, but yet they were projecting all in the news that he died of this staph infection. And it indirectly kind of placed the blame on me because I'm the one responsible for catching those types of things. And I couldn't believe that the school would report something like this. And within a few days, we had a rushed autopsy, and we also had testing prior to him passing away, confirming that he never even had what the school said he died of. But it didn't matter. All of that information was projected out there. It was all in the news. It actually made it national. And I felt inside this huge rush of energy as if I did something to contribute to this young man's death. Even though I knew I didn't do anything, and I took all the proper steps and had him evaluated by the right people and kept him out of practice and kept that even covered when he was around people, I still felt this intense guilt as if I did something to contribute to his death. And I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know how to process it. So I did nothing, which was really the worst thing that I could have done. I let my ego get in the way, and I just thought I can just handle it. It'll just go away. So as I let the days and the weeks, the months, and even years begin to pass, I started developing all of these different symptoms inside, all of this unknown anxiety, this pain that was always constant in my right shoulder blade, pain that was in my back, the inability to sleep. I was up in just pure fear every single night. Then the simple things in life, like being able to step into the shower or wash my face, became unbearable because I was terrified every time I'd walk into that bathroom. I knew that this was taking over my life, and I knew I needed serious help. But in my gut, I knew that what traditional therapy offered me was not going to help this. And I have nothing against it. I've actually done counseling many times, and I love it. I think it works really well for a lot of people. But I knew in this case, there was something else. There was something deeper that I needed to do to get to the root of what I was feeling. And at this point, I considered myself a pretty religious person, and I went to church quite a bit. I believed in God. But at this point in my life, I was so angry. I was so upset at God because I was this good person. How could this happen to me? All I'm trying to do is help people in my life, and how could this happen to me? So I pled with God at this point, and I said, if you're really up there, then I need you to help me. I need you to send help my way because I don't think I'm going to make it. And the only way that I could describe to you the pain that was inside of me is if it was like a broken heart. I felt like I was slowly dying of this broken heart, that I was losing pieces of who I was every single day. And I also was making choices and hanging out with people that were so poor for me. Choices that in my right mind, I probably would have never made for myself. But looking back on it, all of it needed to happen to get me to where I am right now. So earlier when I talked to God, I'm like, if you're really up there, please send me this help so I can change. I want to change. I just don't know how. And so the strangest thing happened to me. And a friend called me and she said, Lindsey, I'm not sure if you'd be interested in this, but this shaman is coming to our area, and I really think that this would benefit you. And I was like, what the heck is a shaman? I had no idea. So I started doing some research and looking at what ceremony was about, and I got scared to death. I'm like, yep, no way. I am not doing this weird stuff. No way. So I didn't. And my life began to unravel more and more and more, and I could feel myself slowly dying on the inside. Now, it wasn't the type of where I wanted to kill myself or anything like that. It was just that my light was going out on the inside. I just didn't feel like being here anymore. So this friend came back to me about 4 months later, and she reached out and said, hey, the shaman is coming back to our area again. I really think you should try this. So I decided I was going to do it. And I was scared out of my mind because it was in the middle of nowhere with people that I didn't know. But I knew I needed to do something. And so I went, and you have to go with an intention. What is it that you want to change about your life? And so as I sat and I thought about it, I realized that I was holding on to this unknown guilt that wasn't even mine for something that I didn't even do. But I was holding on to this, and I really wanted to release this. So I go to session, and part of the session is expressing your intention. And so I did in front of this group of 30 people who I did not know at all. And the shaman really took this time to work with me that night. I felt so blessed because I think he could feel how scared I was to do this process. And I had no idea how it was going to go. And so as we started getting into this meditative state, I was just looking around all over the place, and nothing was happening to me. And an hour goes by, and I'm still looking around, and nothing's happening. And another hour goes by, and I'm still looking all around, and nothing is still happening. And then I decided I'm just going to shut my eyes and just try to relax. And the next thing you know, I saw myself inside, locked in this cage. And this woman that was there in real life, she came over to me and she said, honey, can I let you out? And I was like startled of, oh my gosh, can you see what I'm thinking? And she said, yes. She goes, you've locked yourself in prison, and I'm here to help you through this. And so I gave her permission to unlock that cage, and all of a sudden this door opens up, and I'm in this magical meditation, and it's kind of like a rainforest. That's what I was seeing everywhere, was just trees and brush everywhere. And she said, walk with me to this stream. And I remember walking down this pathway with her, and there was this big stream. She goes, look down into this stream. And I remember going over and like looking down into this stream, and all of a sudden I go, oh my God, I'm a beast. Because when I looked down in that stream, I was expecting to see a reflection of me as a human, but it was this cheetah looking thing. And it scared the daylights out of me. And she calmed me down and said, continue to walk with me. And we walked deeper into the woods, and there was this big tree trunk. And my whole body changed into this cheetah. And she asked me to jump onto this tree trunk. I'm not going to lie, I was freaking out quite a bit that this was happening to me, but there was also something inside of me that was just trusting of her to guide me through this process. And as I was like perched on this tree trunk and I'm looking around, all of a sudden these rainforest animals, they were mostly birds, started coming out behind the brush, and they had these big eyes, and they were gawking at the beauty of this cheetah. Well, all of a sudden it takes me back to 12 years old. And at 12 years old, something back then, it was pretty big, happened to me. But as the adult, I chuckled to myself. But at that age, I was going through my menstrual cycle, and nobody else around me was going through that. And I grew really, really big at that point, and I felt so out of place. And this young man told me back then something, he actually gave me a compliment about my body, but because I was so just disgusted with myself at that point, I just took it as this horrible, mean thing that he was saying to me. And ever since that point, that is where I started making this negative dialogue in my head about myself. That's where the judgments of myself began at that age. And every day I started telling myself how ugly I was, how fat I was, how big my nose was, how ugly my hair was. I just was constantly berating myself. So here we are. I was actually 27 at this point when I was doing this work, all these years later. And here I am doing the same thing to myself. That lesson that night wasn't about those boys. That lesson that night was helping me to get to that deeper place. It was showing me that I was the one that was creating so much of the negativity in my life because of what my internal dialogue was about myself. Now, I fooled myself because I thought I was this great person by outside of myself helping people and doing great things for other people. But really, on the inside, I was bashing myself. I was judging myself. I was literally punching myself in the face every single day. And in that moment, I realized that I was my own enemy. Then I heard these words, and if God ever talked to me, it was in this moment, and I heard the words, "Who created you?" And I answered, I said, "God created me." They said, "Then why are you destroying his artwork?" And this energy went through me where it was that conscious recognition of I am doing this to myself. I am creating this negative life for myself. And all of a sudden it showed me this really simple tool. And it was to look at myself in the mirror every day and say one positive thing about myself. Now, I thought, this is really stupid. And this seems so simple. But I guess I'm going to try it. So I left that meditation and I went home. And again, I lived on my own at this time. I was 27. And I remember going into my bathroom, sitting on my countertop, looking into the mirror, and I just started bawling my eyes out. I couldn't come up with one thing about myself. Not one positive thing could I come up with. I sat there for 45 minutes bawling. And I thought, how sad. How did I get here? How did I create this person? How did I not see that I was doing this to myself? So then I finally came up with something because I got sick of sitting there, and I said something about my eyes. And I went over to a blank journal I had, and I wrote down what I said. And day after day after day, I made myself face myself in the mirror. So for the first month, I just kind of went from here on up, and I said things about my body because that's what I trashed the most. So I started with that. And then the next 30 days, I went to a dresser mirror where I can kind of go from waist up, and I continued saying these one positive things about myself. The third month, I went to a full-length mirror, and that was so hard to have to look at my entire body. And I continued to say that one positive thing about myself. Now, I'm not going to lie. I felt like I was totally lying every day, that I was totally BSing myself. But something started to happen. All these people outside of me started saying, like, "Lindsey, there's something different about you." And it was people at the school I worked with. It was some people at the hospital that I also worked with. It was some random friends. So there was no consistency in the people. They were coming from all different areas. And they're like, "There's just something different about you, but I don't know what it is." And then after that boy died on the football team, every year after that, I would put on these 10 pounds. And it was like clockwork. Every August 1st would hit, I'd put on that weight, and it would come off in the wintertime. But I ate very well, I worked out, and I could not lose this 10 pounds. Well, all of a sudden, this weight just dropped off of me. And then somebody who wasn't very nice to me, actually, she came up to me and said, "Hey, happy looks good on you." Did she just give me a compliment? And I recognized, I'm like, wow, all these people are saying these things, but I don't really know what's different because I didn't feel anything on the inside. But the only thing that I was doing different was that I was facing myself in that mirror and I was writing it down. So I continued to do it and continued to do it and continued to do it. And then all of a sudden, all these positive things started shifting. I met my husband, and then I actually got out of that job and I got in with a holistic chiropractor who introduced me to this awesome technique called neuro-emotional technique that I had to go back to school for. And here, neuro-emotional technique was so much of what I was doing with the shaman. It was just giving it some definition. And I realized in that moment, oh my gosh, I'm able to help people get to those deep layers of the subconscious and give them these tools to change their life. And all this alignment started happening in my life in such a positive way. And again, as I reflected, the only thing that was different was doing that one positive thing a day. And I thought to myself, what a simple thing. And this gave me such a reward. So I knew in this moment that this huge thing, I needed to teach about this. And so I left the chiropractic office and I opened up my own office. And I not only do neuro-emotional technique where I help people unlock these deep subconscious blockages, but I also teach these courses on the tools that were given to me in these meditations. And these simple things, by adding them to my life, I have got dramatic positive change. So as I began teaching people and putting these courses together, I realized that before any of this could have occurred, the first thing that I had to do was commit to myself. I had to commit that I no longer wanted to live that life of pain, that I had enough of it. And even though I was extremely scared to do this healing work, I took that step forward and I did it. And so as I began writing this course and thinking about commitment to your self-care, there was a few things that really stood out to me. And the first part of committing, I realized that this is the link between talking the talk and walking the walk. So many of us say, oh, I want the change, but we actually don't do the work to get there. And the work, it is the hardest part. But it's also the most rewarding part. You know, it does take work to get there. It really does. And I'm not going to lie and say it's super simple, because it absolutely is not. It makes you go through some of this pain. But in order to learn the lesson, in order to see why the pain is there, you've got to walk through that instead of burying it or putting it aside. You know, the commitment piece, it is the groundwork. It is the actual foundation, okay, as to how we create change in our life. And so I wrote a commitment letter to myself. I wrote this letter that I was going to make this change, and I was going to do this for myself. For the first time, I was going to put myself first. And so I did. So I wrote this letter to myself, and I just want to take 1 second and just read you what I wrote. And I wrote, "Dear self, I am dedicated and committed to the healing of my full self by honoring all parts of my being on a physical and mental, emotional, and spiritual level. I promise to honor myself daily in a practice of my choosing. I promise to love myself by thinking and feeling positive about myself and others. I am attracting all positive circumstances into my life, and I open myself up to attracting only the best possible outcomes. I am committed to the healing of myself, and I accept all lessons that come into my life. I trust myself to follow through with my spiritual healing, and I now commit to myself to my full healing. With love, love, and more love, I commit to myself." I signed it and I dated it. This is something that I have, that I go back to when I'm struggling. I go back and I read this letter. It was something I just wrote. It was a letter to myself, and you can either make one up or you can Google one, but this was a commitment contract to myself. Then I began to look at different areas of my life. whether it was me physically, emotionally, spiritually. I looked at my family life. I looked at my work life. I looked at friendships, relationships, and I just started taking an inventory. Am I committed in these different areas? And I would just write it down. Am I committed to exercising? Am I committed to drinking water every single day? Am I committed to putting healthier foods into my body? Am I taking too much medication? Am I taking the right vitamins for myself? And I just started, again, asking myself all these different questions and then circling yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And I realized that a lot of the things that I was writing down, I was circling no, that I wasn't doing these things for myself. And that was a big red flag of like, girlfriend, you got to get into gear. You have got to take better care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, there's no way that you actually can truly take care of other people. I was always brought up to think that I've got to take care of others. And the shaman truly helped me realize that it is not selfish to take care of yourself, because that's what I thought of. If I take care of myself, if I do things for myself, that's selfish. And he explained to me, he goes, that's ego. That's ego. And I'm like, but I don't understand. Ego is when you feel like you're better than others or you're above others. And he goes, Lindsey, that's just one part of ego. That's one side of the spectrum of it. The other side is when you don't feel that you are good enough or that you are less than. Ego is about a separation of self, whether you feel above others or you feel below others. But it is a separation of self. And when he put it in that way, I realized I was doing that to myself. I was making myself feel less than. So how can I truly help other people if I don't see myself as good enough? So going back to this inventory, it was making me realize I was less than. I was definitely not taking care of myself. So I picked 3 of those areas that I really was not doing well in, okay? And I created 3 affirmations for myself. I took those negative statements and I flipped them into positive statements. When you do affirmations, at first, they're going to feel fake, they're going to feel false, they're going to feel untrue. They're going to feel like you're lying to yourself. They should. Okay? And what I started doing is I stated them in present tense. I used I am eating healthy foods every day. I am drinking half my body weight in fluid ounces. I am honoring myself. So I took those 3 affirmations, I wrote them down on a piece of paper, and I put them up on my mirror. And I committed that every single day I was going to say those 3 affirmations to myself. How hard could that be? Saying that one time a day. It was hard. There was many days it was right in front of my face, but I forgot to do it. But what I did, instead of beating myself up on the days that I forgot to do it, I would just get back on the saddle and do it again the next day. And as I did that again, day after day after day, I recognized there was shifting again.
What is life? What is death? What am I doing here? Who am I without?
I sat up in bed and I realized in that instant of sitting up in bed and breathing, I went, like this breathing in air. I realized I hadn't been breathing the whole time that I'd been in this experience. And I made that sound so loudly, it woke Tony up. And he sat up and said, what's wrong, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know, but my life will never be the same again.
It got bigger and bigger and brighter until it was filling in every direction, and it was made up of lights and flames and white, and just got closer and closer, and then all of a sudden it hit me.
But suddenly there was like this kind of like this portal just opened, that there I could just sense that I have access to all the information in the universe.
So I had like this very deep connection with my team, offered up this prayer, And within like 2 months, my entire life fell apart. So, spirit doesn't mess around. And when you ask, it is always given.
And then in that dream, I understood that what I am is mirrored throughout the whole cosmos, that I'm part of all of that. I am literally part of everything in the cosmos, and all of that is part of me. It can be seen by me through these mirrors. And so I felt like this web of life, you cannot unplug from it. You cannot get out of it. No matter what you do, you are in it, and it is glorious. And all of that energy and potential and creativity and possibility is ours. And that all of the universe is reflected in our very being, in our very selves. And everything that we are is reflected throughout the whole universe too. There is no separateness. There is no such thing as anything being separate.
2020, what a ride. My life is 100,000 times better than I ever imagined it could be.